I'm Claes from Bitwig, and I'm going to show you some new stuff. What have changed since last year? So, since last year we released the grid, which was the big version 3 feature, and we also released 3.1 and a few small subsequent updates, including a Christmas surprise with the vocoder. This is the new vocoder we released on Christmas as a surprise for our users. So it's a nice vocoder with a lot of, you can have up to 80 bands, support stereo. You have two different filter types, either 4 or 8 pole filters with attack release settings, release form and shift control. But what really sets it apart is the way how we handle routing. It's instead of making it complicated and using like a built-in carrier and all these things, we just keep it simple and letting you have two different device chains where you can decide what happens to the modulator versus the carrier signal. So here, I have an audio sample record coming from a second track by inserting an audio receiver in the carrier. But if I load a different preset, so let's take this guy, it's a robot. You can see that the carrier is now instead filled with an FX grid, which then contains oscillators. Should you zoom out now? Or because it's going to be like this. Okay, then I can do this preset instead contains an FX grid where the oscillators are actually located inside of the grid. So we omitted quite a lot of features that you traditionally have on a vocoder, let's say like voiced, unvoiced detection, all of that, because we're able to replicate that using modulators and the modules inside the grid. So let's start by adding a polygrid. In Bitwig Studio 3, we added the polygrid and FX grid, which are the modular environment inside Bitwig Studio. The polygrid is for a polyphonic synth, can of course also be monophonic, and it's kind of special in the way that it tries to be more intuitive than modular systems usually were. So it's kind of like blends the boundaries between a normal synth and what a modular system is in terms of complexity of using it. So it always starts out with a triangle wave. In the envelopes you actually get something to play with, but what sets it apart is kind of how easy it is to work with. If I want to add another oscillator, I can just drop it on the port here, the phase modulation. If I want to see what's happening, I can just add an oscilloscope. I get a perfectly good what it's actually doing. Special in the grid is always that the connections that you do, they're 4 times oversample, which means that you have a lot of bandwidth to play with phase modulation and things like this before you start getting aliasing. But they're also stereo, so each connection is stereo. In terms of mono stereo, and really get a wide sound really easy and combine things in different ways. And we also have a bunch of sequencer modules built into it that you can use to trigger different things. So instead of triggering the note in manually, I need to turn one. Start sequencing in here. But all in all, it's a very intuitive environment to work. We made it really fast and easy to use. Also new in version 3.1 is the micro-pitch device. So the micro-pitch device, you see, you have a different tuning setting for each key inside Bitwig, and you can retune each key individually. So the classic example would be that the 7th, if you use chromatic tuning, you hear that there's a slight beating between the C and the G in this case, the fifth. But if you detune it slightly, I'm going to load one of the preset scales, the Johnson one. It's off by a few cents, which makes the fifth lock in perfectly with the primary tone. So, but it also gives the scale a totally different mood. So, even though microtuning is a very kind of like a subtle thing, it gives you a lot of more character to the playing or different vibe than just chromatic tuning. But we try to keep it as...
And that's brand new, that plugin?
Yeah, that's in 3.1. It came in December. Yeah.
Nice.
So. But we try to make it really intuitive, that you see which key lights up, so that you get a good idea what you're actually doing. Because otherwise it's very easy that it becomes too subtle and you don't really get a hang of what's happening.
Right.
Like you really need to know which key is being invoked at that very moment. So, but a lot of focus on that. And we also added a new micro pitch modulator. No, actually, the pitch 12, which means that you can trigger, you get a modulation source for each key in the scale. So I can make the presence of one key make this sound completely different. And this one can work either monophonically or polyphonically. That would mean that the presence of one key would change all the voices, or each key is done individually, and also with a lag time. So this is kind of like a very small module, but it adds up a lot of flexibility to build, because we kind of like have the philosophy that we want to keep each individual component very simple,
right?
But that they can work together to fill a bigger. You create the complexity by using many parts together, not each
but
part.
Do it easily.
Yeah.
Build the complexity easily.
Yeah.
I like it.